So here's a good example of an old wound on this Bursera or Bursera. You can see all that resin that's leaked out. And that is great for starting fires. Grab a piece of that and carry it with you. It's really helpful.
All right, so day 2 in Baja California Sur, and I backpack solo into this really wild canyon way up in the Sierra de La Giganta range. And you can see a lot of that rugged desert back up there behind me, all covered in cactus and mesquite and palo blanco and bursera, all this really cool desert plant life that you would expect. But then you can see behind me here, there's this tree that really sticks out. And I know that it's a fig tree. I think it's native. I'm not 100% sure on that. But the leaves look different than figs that I've seen in other places. A lot of the figs have these like 3 lobes, and this looks more like almost like a cottonwood leaf or something like that. So really cool tree, and it's got all these like amazing root systems that are reaching way down into these rocks, and I'm sure that's where it gets its water from. But I wanted to walk over and show you guys some of this because it's pretty cool. So I've got my little setup here, and there's a few different things that I wanted to show folks. We've got some of this Bursera sap to start our fire. We've got some of the berries that come off of the Bursera tree. And these things, if you crack them open, they smell amazing. And then I'm gonna try and burn a couple of other things today to see what the properties are like. So these are a couple of little patches of resin that come off of that palo blanco. And then this is a dry mushroom that came straight off the trunk of one of those palo blanco trees. So we're gonna see if that burns as well. I've got my snacks for this trip. I've got some coffee, an apple, got some dates, dried fruit, and then I've got these fresh tortillas that were made right out of the factory the morning that we left. You could see them coming off of the machine, so that was pretty awesome. So tortillas de maíz y de harina, flour and corn tortillas. So this here is a branch off of that fig tree. Try and give you some better light here. And you might be able to see all the little tiny figs on there. And I'm guessing they don't really get any bigger than that because a lot of the ones that I found, they're all already old and dry. And you can find them on the ground. And you crack them open and they look exactly like a fig, all the tiny little seeds in there. But it's just a very small version of figs that you might be used to. Now, this, when I broke it off, I don't know how well you can see that, but it was leaking this milky sap. And I don't know if it has any toxin in it, but a lot of plants that have that in that milky color, that's an indication that there might be something toxic in there. So you might not want to get that in your eyes or on your skin too much, even though the figs themselves are probably edible. So kind of interesting. Here's one little green fig that I found, and it's really hard still, so I'm sure it's not ripe. So they're either all really old or just starting to ripen up, but nothing here is something that I would attempt to eat. But really cool to see these wild figs out here. And if you want to take a look at this tree, the root system, this will give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Really amazing root system, and it climbs all the way down into these rocks. And I can't even believe that there's a living organism that can make its way through these rocks like that to find water. You can see how they start all these tiny little roots. But very cool fig tree. If you want to look up and see the canopy here, another perspective, but not really what you would expect in this Baja California soar desert if you've never been here, right? Now you got some of these other cactus species, the garambulo back there behind me, the one that has the pitaya fruit, one of the ones that has a pitaya fruit, and ocotillo is up here. You got Oregon pipe, cardon, all kinds of other really cool plants. So pretty amazing. Here's a palo blanco. You can see that white tree behind me, and there's no palms in this particular spot, but I just camped out next to a couple of palm trees earlier. So very cool.
Some of the native figs here, they're tiny little figs off of this tree. Way back here in Baja California Sur. Very dry place, but they have roots that dive deep down. And I'm guessing there's water down here if you dug down far enough.
All right, so we're here underneath this same fig tree down here in the bottom of a canyon in Baja California Sur. And here's my little setup, my little picnic area for now. I'm gonna put together a fire, but I'm starting with a small bit of leaves and small sticks, and then that really nice flame that you see going there, that is Bursera sap that I just lit. And that's given me a really good starting point to start feeding this fire. And it burns really slow and hot. And you know, each one of these little clusters, they're about the size of the tip of my thumb. They'll burn for a few minutes. So putting these on all this dry tinder, they're gonna get that tinder going really easy. And if I want, I can just start feeding it other things, and it'll probably take off really fast when I start doing this. So this right here is a dried branch off of that fig tree. This is the first time I've ever tried to burn wild fig wood, so we'll see what kind of quality this has. It's a very lightweight wood, very soft wood. It doesn't seem to burn real well, but there's other stuff we have here that's going to burn much better. I've got some of these different things like the spindle off of a some kind of yucca, and then there's the skeletons of different cactuses that are burning pretty well. And we've also got some of the Bursera wood, which is much more lightweight than I thought it was going to be, like a lot softer wood. This is a trunk off of an old dead Bursera tree. I think it was off a copal tree, and yeah, it's much lighter weight than I anticipated it would be. But I think if we get this kind of set up so it's not smashing the fire, but right over the, kind of leaning up on that rock, that's going to get going really nice. All right, so this will give you a good perspective here on what Palo Blanco looks like, and I think you can see why they get the name white stick or white tree. I don't know of any medicinal uses for this particular tree. There could be some in the literature. And you can also see in comparison to some of the other plants what else is out here. So you see some of these little organ pipe cactuses in the background. And then over on the other side, some of those really big, thick cactuses, those are cardon. And those get a lot bigger, of course. Those can grow up to something like 60 feet, I think is the max that's ever been found out in the wild. They don't all grow that big. On average, something like over 30 feet is pretty common. So you can see the cardon, and then there's another good shot of a organ pipe right over here, and another palo blanco behind that. So there's some more species of plants from Baja California Sur for you.
All right, so this little conch mushroom that I lit about 20 minutes ago. I only left it over the fire for a minute or two, and got a little bit of a ember burning on the end of it, and it's been burning like a cigar ever since then. Very, very slow. So you could easily figure out some way to harness this thing without burning your pack or whatever, and carry this with you from location to location. I bet it would last hours, at least a few hours, especially if you're walking and the wind is feeding it a little, just enough. Pretty amazing use. So this was off the side of a palo blanco tree, this dry conch mushroom. Don't know what species it is, but it has a great use as a fire carrying piece of wood. Well, I guess it's actually not wood, it's mushroom. Alright, so here in Baja California Sur, taking a look up this canyon here, this oasis that pours through the desert. You'd be amazed at how much water there is in some of these drainages. This is all lined with palms because there's so much water in here. Now, there's around 3 species of palms in Baja California Sur, 2 native fan palms and 1 non-native date palm. You can see there's a big difference between this big one here and a lot of these palms down in the drainage. Give you a little bit of contrast between different species found here. I don't know if you can find both fan palms in this drainage or not, but this will give you a good idea. And all 3 of those should have some kind of fruit on them that's edible. So, a lot of options there. A little bit about wild edible plants that are in this area, and also seasonality and how important seasonality is in considering what is edible down here. Some of these are actually practical for things that you could harvest and use as like a practical provisional thing, and people do that with some of the plant species down here in Baja California Sur in Mexico. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this Salicornia plant here. It has several different common names: dwarf pickleweed, dwarf woody glasswort, several different things, but this is related to the woody glasswort or the pickleweed plant that you find throughout much of the United States, and it's just a little bit smaller version of that. So you can see the little segments on here if you get a good look at that. And what you're looking for when you go to eat these is the fresh green shoots that are at the top. Even some of these are a little bit too far gone, but it's very salty, and it actually has great flavor because of the salt. And if you get the really fresh green sprouts on that, it's almost like a little bit of like a asparagus with salt added to it. And you can cook these or eat them raw. And you can see that's a whole field behind me of this stuff. So there's options all over the place to harvest this. Now, in terms of other things that you have just in this general area, you've got another species of pitaya cactus right here, and during the right season you're going to get fruit on that. But this is January down here in Baja California Sur,
that's the winter time. That's not the season to harvest the fruits. So you're going to get these flowering sometime in the late spring, and then probably get fruit on that in the late summer, July or August, something along those lines. Now you've got another plant here. This is a species of cholla cactus that you will be able to get edible fruit on as well, but again, that's season dependent, and this is not the right season. And most of these cactus species, they're going to be going off at least generally at the same time. You might be able to see behind me some of these big cardone cactus, the ones that get upwards of 60 feet if you're in the right place. They won't get that big down here in Baja California soil probably, but certainly you got some like this one over behind me here. That's over 30 feet tall. So 30 to 40 feet is fairly common for those. And those get an edible fruit on them as well. Again, season dependent. So far, the only thing that we found that you could harvest right now is that Salicornia, that pickleweed plant that I showed you in the beginning. Now this, you might see these berries on this copal tree, and I've talked about these in other videos. They smell incredible, and you can use these for some kind of aromatherapy or many other uses. I'm still looking into some of the medicinal uses on these, but it looks like there's antiseptic uses and a whole range of other things that the indigenous people have used these for in the past. And not just the berries, but the resin and the bark and other components of this. I actually saw, I was way back in the mountains in the Sierra de La Giganta area, and the local people were bagging the dried bark and selling that for medicinal purposes. So they're still doing that till this day. That's not something that's long forgotten. And then you might see in another video that I plucked the hard resin that was leaking out of one of these and used it to start a fire. It burns incredibly well. It's the best fire starter I've found. It's up there with like pine and spruce resin and things along these lines, if not even better than that. Now, this is all in a very close area, and you can see a lot of different options here. So this is a garambul, and that's another kind of cactus that will give you a pitaya fruit during the right season. Okay, so you're not going to get anything off of that right now in January. You got several months before you'll be able to get anything off of that. So gotta watch our step. There's a lot of different cactus to watch out for here. A lot of things that are trying to reach out and poke and grab at you, so you got to be careful. Now this little plant here, how well you can see this, this is a wolfberry plant, and you can see these tiny little green leaves on here, little succulent like leaves. This is related to a well, all the wolfberries, right? This is the genus Lycium, I think, and we have these in South Texas where I'm from, along with many of the other things that you'll see out here. A lot of them have relatives that are found throughout the southwestern United States especially. Now this is related to tomatoes, and during the right season this plant will get bright red little berries on there, and they are edible. They're not out right now, right? So now you're walking past all these plants that have potentially edible food, but we're not here during the right season for it. Now, I don't see anything else in this general vicinity that I can point out to you, but just within probably a 20-25 yard walk here, I was able to identify half a dozen different things that you could potentially use for food and or other medicinal uses. So there's a lot of useful stuff out here in the desert if you know what you're looking for. All right, so this is a wild tobacco plant here, and this is a member of the genus Nicotiana, and it gets that name because of the nicotine content within the plant, that nicotine alkaloid that's found in here. And this is a cousin, or it's a relative of the wild tobacco plants that we have across parts of the United States. The original tobacco species that would have been used for smoking and used by indigenous people and eventually cultivated, all members of the same genus. Now, this particular species, I don't think this is native to Baja California. This is probably one of the invasive species that you can find in some areas. And this is not a species that I think you can ingest or smoke. It has some pretty toxic components that don't make it suitable for that kind of use. And this is originally from South America, this particular invasive species. But you can see, based on the flowers, this is a really good way to identify members of this genus. Okay, and the leaves are also pretty distinct, but the best way is going to be using these flowers for identification. And the hummingbirds here, even though this is not native, they love these flowers. There was just a hummingbird feeding not too long ago just on one of these plants next to me here. And very cool. Wild tobacco plant, a member of the Nicotiana genus. Okay, so this is a completely different kind of habitat. I'm now on the Pacific coast of Baja California, in Baja California Sur specifically. And now we're in all this like really rocky terrain, and there's a whole different set of plants that are added to the mix on this side than there were on the Sea of Cortez side, on the eastern percent. So right behind me, we got this huge agave here. These are really cool. They've got these really sharp spines on every leaf here, if you want to call it a leaf. And yeah, these are definitely something that you could use. They are edible, but you should cook the base of it if you're going to eat some of the contents there. And then if there is a stalk coming up, you can cook that. You can see an old dry one here. So see a couple of these old stalks. It goes way up. It's probably about, I don't know, 12 feet tall or so. So pretty good sized. But there's a lot of these agaves here. And then you've also got prickly pear back in here. So give me 1 second, get out some of this stuff. And you've got cholla, a species of cholla right there. And then we've got a species of prickly pear right here. So you could eat this prickly pear if you get the fresh new growing pads from the top. Those are going to be the best. We're in the middle of about an 18-month drought here in Baja California, so not exactly prime time to get new growing pads, but one of the few things during the winter here and during a drought where you might actually be able to eat the plant itself. You know, a lot of this, the agave, you could get some of that if you cooked it, but a lot of these other cactus species, like I mentioned in other videos, it's not the right season for getting fruit. So some of these other species, back my way out of here, you know, you've got this species of organ pipe right here. You're not going to get fruit on that until sometime in the summer. And then there's a couple of other things in here. There's no cardone really. I guess there's a few cardone way off on the hillside back in there. I don't know if you can see those, but again, those aren't going to have fruit this time of year. So really, not a lot of options up here in these highlands. We're pretty high up in elevation. You might be able to see some of those mountain tops way off in the distance. That's the Sierra de La Giganta, looking at it from the Pacific side. But there's some really cool rugged country back in here. I've been on a dirt road for a long time, and it took me a couple hours to get back up in here. And obviously there's nobody up in this country. The road getting in is really rough dirt road. And I'm gonna camp out up here tonight. Now, I don't know if you can see behind me, there's one lone fig tree up on that hill, and it's just such a strange place for that to be. I don't know, that there's got to be maybe some water way down in those rocks for those root systems to get to, and I don't know how far down those roots can go, but there's no obvious water source up in here. It's just nothing but rugged lava rock country all through this whole section here, all this terrain. So pretty rugged stuff, pretty amazing. You can see some really cool examples of some of these old agaves back behind me here, really tall. You know, those are pushing 15 feet on some of those stalks. Really amazing plant life up in here. It's like a museum or some kind of botanical garden. It's just completely different than any desert I've ever been to before. Very cool stuff.